The chandeliers of the Metropolitan Innovators Gala hung like constellations of frozen fire, casting a mercilessly brilliant light upon the city's elite. In this gilded cage of judgment, smiles were weapons and whispers were daggers. On stage, bathed in the warm glow of a single spotlight, stood Adrian Cross, at 46. He possessed a stillness that was often mistaken for detachment, but those who knew him understood it as a form of immense, contained energy. His suit was a whisper of dark, tailored silk, his posture immaculate. He was accepting the Humanitarian of the Year award, a recognition that felt both deeply validating and profoundly ironic. The presenter's voice, a smooth baritone amplified throughout the grand ballroom, had just finished lauding Nova Dynamics, Adrian's company. And by pioneering a radical corporate restructuring, Mr. Cross and his team not only saved the company, but preserved over 5,000 jobs, proving that compassionate leadership and profitability are not mutually exclusive. A wave of polite, percussive applause filled the room. Adrian stepped to the podium, the heavy crystal award cool in his hands. He looked out over the sea of faces, powerful, influential, hungry, and began to speak. His voice was low, measured, devoid of the theatricality common to these events. "Thank you," he began. "This award isn't for me. It is a testament to the resilience of every employee at Nova Dynamics who chose to believe in a different way forward. It belongs to the families who trusted us when the conventional wisdom was to cut, to downsize, to abandon." He spoke of innovation not as a tool for profit, but as a responsibility. He spoke of a future built on sustainable growth and human dignity. The room was rapt. His quiet charisma was a stark contrast to the usual bombast of his peers. He was an outsider who had crashed their party and, against all odds, was now being celebrated for it. Then, from a table near the front, a chair scraped against the polished marble floor. The sound was a discordant scratch across a perfect symphony. A man rose to his feet. It was Victor Langford. At 56, Victor was a relic of an older, more brutal era of finance. His face was a ruddy mask of privilege, his body thick with the spoils of a lifetime of aggressive acquisition. He moved with the unthinking entitlement of a predator in his own territory. He strode toward the stage, plucked a microphone from a startled event organizer, and the warm, respectful atmosphere in the ballroom instantly flash froze. The hum of the audio system filled the sudden, brittle silence. An inspiring sentiment. "Adrian." Victor's voice boomed, dripping with a condescending bonhomie that failed to conceal the venom beneath. "Truly, a story of redemption. We all love those, don't we?" Adrian stopped speaking. He did not look surprised or angry. He simply watched Victor, his expression unreadable, his hands resting lightly on the podium. The spotlight operator, confused, widened the beam to include both men, trapping them together in a circle of harsh white light. Victor prowled the edge of the stage, the microphone cord trailing behind him like a leash. "But as we celebrate this triumph, I think it's only fair to remember that not all of Mr. Cross's ventures have ended so happily. Some of us recall a time when his brand of innovation had a much higher cost. A cost paid not in stock points, but in lives." A collective gasp, sharp and unified, swept through the ballroom. This was more than a breach of decorum. It was a public execution. Reputation was the only currency that truly mattered in this room, and Victor was setting fire to Adrian's. "He speaks of foundations," Victor continued, his voice rising with theatrical fervor. "But I have to ask, what is the foundation of Nova Dynamics built upon? Is it built on the ashes of his first company, on the tragedy he so conveniently left behind in a small town No one here has ever heard of a fatal accident. Wasn't it a result of cutting corners in the name of progress? He didn't need to say more. The implication was a poison dart, and it had found its mark. The whispers that followed were no longer polite. They were frenzied, ravenous. Adrian's carefully constructed image as a benevolent visionary was cracking before their eyes. Adrian remained motionless. The silence stretched, becoming a physical weight that pressed down on the entire room. He could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on him, dissecting him, judging him, in their gaze. He was no longer humanitarian of the year. He was a fraud, a man with a dark secret. Finally, he leaned into the microphone. His voice, when it came, was impossibly calm. It cut through the murmuring with the clean, cold precision of a surgeon's scalpel. "Thank you, Victor," he said, his gaze locked with Langford's, "for your perspective." He then turned his attention back to the audience, his composure so absolute it was unnerving. "As I was saying," he continued, as if there had been no interruption, "the future belongs to those who are willing to build it, responsibly." He placed the award gently on the podium, gave a slight, formal nod, and walked off the stage. He didn't rush. His steps were even, deliberate. The applause that followed was hesitant, confused. The spell was broken. Victor Langford stood alone in the spotlight, a smug, triumphant smirk on his face. He had won the moment, but in seat 2D, Helena Ward, the formidable chairwoman of a global investment fund, watched Adrian's retreating back with narrowed eyes. She was a woman who saw the world as a grand, bloody chess game, and she recognized Adrian's quiet exit for what it was. It wasn't a retreat. It was the deliberate, silent positioning of a queen, just before a devastating checkmate. The war had just begun. The gala dissolved into a maelstrom of discreet gossip. Adrian navigated the gilded battlefield with the same unnerving calm he'd shown on stage. He accepted condolences that were thinly veiled interrogations, and congratulations that felt like accusations. He saw the flicker of doubt in the eyes of his allies, and the glint of predatory glee in the eyes of his rivals. Victor Langford was holding court across the room, his laughter booming, accepting backpats from men who smelled blood in the water. Helena Ward intercepted Adrian near the French doors leading to the terrace. She was a vision in emerald silk, a glass of champagne held in her hand like a scepter. "That was quite the performance," she murmured, her voice a low, cynical purr. "Victor hasn't been that clumsy since he tried to short the tech bubble in '99. "He's never been known for his subtlety," Adrian replied, his gaze fixed on the city lights twinkling beyond the glass. "This wasn't about subtlety, Adrian. This was a declaration of war," Helena said, her eyes sharp. "He didn't just attack your reputation. He exhumed a ghost. Why now?" Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Ghosts don't stay buried forever, Helena, especially when someone is determined to go digging." "Then you need a better shovel," she said flatly, "or a taller fence. What Victor did tonight was personal. This isn't just a corporate play." She took a delicate sip of champagne. "I've known Victor for 20 years. He's a shark. He attacks when he smells weakness or opportunity. What did he smell on you?" Adrian turned to face her, the reflection of the ballroom's chaos dancing in his glasses. "Success," he said simply. "He sees a world where there are a finite number of seats at the table, and he can't stand that I built my own." Helena's lips curved into a wry smile. "A lovely sentiment for a business school textbook. But I don't buy it. Victor is many things. But he isn't sentimental. There's a piece missing. Find it." She gestured with her glass toward the crowd. "In the meantime, your board will be getting nervous. An accusation like that, even a vague one, makes investors jittery. You need to get ahead of this. I will, Adrian said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. He left the gala without another word, the sound of the orchestra fading behind him as he stepped into the cool night air. His driver was waiting, the sleek black car, a silent promise of escape. But there was no escape. Adrian's apartment was a sterile sanctuary of glass and steel overlooking the city. It was minimalist to the point of being monastic, a space designed for clarity and control. There were no family photos, no clutter, only clean lines and shades of gray. It was the home of a man who kept his inner world meticulously cordoned off from public view. He loosened his tie and stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, the city sprawling below like a circuit board of pulsing light. The events of the evening replayed in his mind not with anger, but with a cold, analytical precision. Victor's words, the crowd's reaction, Helena's warning. It was a calculated attack, designed for maximum impact, and it was deeply, intimately connected to the one part of his past he had worked so hard to compartmentalize. On his desk, a single object defied the apartment's sterile aesthetic, a small, framed photograph. Its colors faded with time. It showed two young men in their early 20s, standing proudly in front of a small, dilapidated workshop. They were both smiling, full of the heedless optimism of youth. One was a younger Adrian, his hair longer, his eyes alight with a fire that had since been banked into a controlled burn. The other was a bright-eyed young man with a familiar, handsome face. Adrian picked up the frame, his thumb tracing the glass over the other man's smile. The ghost Victor had exhumed. His name was Leo. That night, the dream came again, as it always did when the pressure mounted. It wasn't a narrative, but a chaotic collage of sensory fragments. The high-pitched whine of machinery under strain, the smell of rain on hot asphalt and ozone in the air, the sickening crunch of metal twisting, screaming its protest. A sudden, blinding white light, followed by an even more blinding darkness. And then, a single, horrifying sound, a profound, final silence where a heartbeat should have been. He woke with a gasp, his own heart hammering against his ribs. The sheets were damp with a cold sweat. He sat up, the city lights outside his window offering no comfort. The past was not a ghost. It was a debt. And Victor Langford, for reasons Adrian was only beginning to suspect, had just arrived to collect. The following morning, the attack began in earnest. The veiled accusation at the gala had been the opening salvo. The full-scale assault was now digital and financial. News outlets, fed by anonymous, concerned sources, ran speculative articles with headlines like Nova Dynamics Humanitarian CEO, A Troubled Past, and The Unanswered Questions Behind Adrian Cross's Rise. The stories were carefully worded to avoid libel, but the insinuation was clear. Adrian's past was being weaponized. In the Nova Dynamics boardroom, a sterile sanctuary on the 80th floor, the tension was palpable. The long, polished table reflected the grim faces of the board members. Adrian stood at the head of the table, a large screen behind him displaying the company's plummeting stock price. The red line angled downward like a patient in cardiac arrest. The drop is being driven by a coordinated short-selling campaign, said Marcus Thorne, his CFO and one of his few trusted allies. Marcus was a man who found comfort in numbers, and the numbers were currently telling him a horror story. It's aggressive. It feels predatory. They're not just betting against us. They're actively trying to drive the price into the ground. And the media narrative is providing them with the perfect cover, added Sarah Jenkins, their head of communications, her face pale. Every negative article fuels the sell-off. We're in a feedback loop. Adrian listened, his expression as serene as the surface of a deep lake. "Who is behind the sell-off?" he asked. Marcus brought up another chart. A complex web of transactions. It's being routed through a dozen different shell corporations, from Delaware to the Cayman Islands. It's designed to be untraceable. This is sophisticated. Adrian. It's a professional hit. "It's Victor Langford," Adrian stated. Not as a question, but as a fact. A nervous silence fell over the room. To openly accuse a man like Victor Langford was a dangerous move. He was too powerful, too well-connected. "We have no proof," one of the older board members, a cautious man named Peterson, pointed out. "These are just market forces reacting to negative press." "Market forces are not this surgical," Adrian countered calmly. Victor declared his intentions at the gala. This is the follow-through. He's creating a crisis of confidence so he can acquire our assets at a discount. A classic corporate raid, wrapped in a personal vendetta. "What do we do?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "We can issue a press release. Deny the rumors." "No," Adrian said, cutting her off. "A denial gives the accusation legitimacy. It puts us on the defensive. We will not play his game. We will play our own." He turned to Marcus. "I want you to trace the money. Every transaction. Every shell company. I don't care how deep you have to dig. Find the source. I want proof." He then looked at Sarah. "For the media, our official position is silence. We are focused on running our business. We do not comment on baseless market speculation." His gaze swept across the anxious faces of the board. "I know this is unsettling, but panicking is what Victor wants. He wants us to make a mistake. We will not give him that satisfaction. Hold the line." His authority, quiet but absolute, settled the room. The board members, while still nervous, nodded in assent. They had seen Adrian navigate crises before. His calm was infectious. After the meeting, Adrian retreated to his office. He called Helena Ward. "Your board meeting went as poorly as I expected, I assume," she answered, foregoing any greeting. "They're nervous," Adrian admitted. "They should be. Victor is gutting your stock price. He's not just trying to buy you cheap. Adrian, he's trying to break you. This level of aggression is passionate." "I need your help, Helena," Adrian said, getting straight to the point. "My team is tracing the financial attacks, but the network is a labyrinth. You have resources, analysts who specialize in the dark corners of international finance. I need to know who Victor is working with." There was a pause on the line. Adrian could picture her swirling a glass of wine, her mind calculating the risks and rewards. "This is messy," she finally said. "Getting involved means making a powerful enemy of Victor. Why should I?" "Because you, more than anyone, despise bullies who rig the game," Adrian said. "And because you know that if he succeeds in dismantling Nova Dynamics, it will send a message that his brand of predatory capitalism is the only one that wins." Helena let out a dry chuckle. "You always did know how to frame an argument. Very well. But my help comes at a price." "Name it." "When you have Victor cornered," she said, her voice turning cold and sharp, "I want a front-row seat to the final act, and I want his seat on the telecom board. He blackballed me from it a decade ago." "Consider it done," Adrian said without hesitation. "I'll have my people start digging," Helena said, and the line went dead. For the next 2 weeks, Nova Dynamics was a company under siege. The stock continued to fall. Key employees were poached by competitors with suspiciously generous offers. A crucial supply chain for their flagship project was mysteriously disrupted, causing a cascade of production delays. Each incident was a small cut, but together, they were causing the company to bleed out. Adrian moved through the crisis with an almost preternatural calm. He held daily town hall meetings, reassuring his employees with transparent updates and unwavering confidence. He worked 18-hour days, managing the operational fires while simultaneously directing the covert investigation into Victor's activities. His team, led by Marcus, worked tirelessly, untangling the web of shell companies. It was a frustrating, painstaking process. Every time they thought they had a lead, it would vanish into another anonymous entity in a country with lax financial regulations. "It's like chasing a ghost," Marcus said during one late-night strategy session, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. "The money moves through 3 countries in a matter of seconds. Whoever set this up is a master at hiding tracks." "Keep digging," Adrian urged, his own face etched with fatigue but his eyes still burning with intensity. "There's always a loose thread." During this time, Adrian found himself drawn more and more to the faded photograph on his desk. He would stare at it for long moments, lost in the memory of a time before success was measured in stock prices, and victory was a matter of corporate survival. He remembered the smell of sawdust and soldering flux in that first workshop. He remembered the shared dream, the boundless energy, the belief that they could build something that would change the world. And he remembered Leo. One evening, Helena called. "My team found something," she said. Her voice clipped. "It's not the smoking gun, but it's interesting. One of the primary shell companies, a firm called Argent Ventures, has a single, silent partner on its registration documents. The name is listed as LL Trust." Adrian felt a jolt, a cold shock that had nothing to do with finance. LL, he repeated softly. "Mean anything to you?" Helena asked, sensing the shift in his tone. Adrian looked at the photograph on his desk, at the smiling face of his former partner, Leo Langford, LL. "Yes," Adrian said, his voice barely a whisper. "I think it means everything." The discovery of the LL Trust was the loose thread Adrian had been searching for. It wasn't concrete proof, but it was a signpost, pointing directly into the heart of the past. Leo Langford. The name was a key, and it unlocked a new, more desperate phase of the investigation. Adrian instructed Marcus to focus all their resources on Argent Ventures and any entity connected to that trust. The pressure on Nova Dynamics continued to mount. Victor Langford, emboldened by Adrian's public silence, escalated his smear campaign. He gave an interview to a major financial news network, his face a mask of solemn concern. "It's a matter of corporate responsibility," Victor said, his voice smooth and authoritative. "Adrian Cross is a brilliant man. No one denies that. But his history shows a pattern of reckless ambition. We have to ask ourselves, is he a stable leader for a company that employs thousands? The market seems to be answering that question for us." He was using the very crisis he had engineered as evidence against Adrian. It was a masterful, ruthless move. Inside Nova Dynamics, the strain was beginning to show. Fear was a quiet contagion, spreading through the hallways. Adrian knew he was running out of time. The board was wavering, and whispers of replacing him with a more stable CEO were growing louder. He had to deliver proof, something undeniable that would expose Victor's entire scheme. Late one night, Marcus burst into Adrian's office, his face alight with the thrill of discovery. He was holding a tablet, a complex diagram of financial flows displayed on the screen. "We found it," he said, his voice breathless. "The LL Trust. We couldn't crack it from the front, so we came at it from the side." He explained that they had analyzed the trading patterns of all the shell companies. They were coordinated, moving in perfect sync. The algorithm they used was highly sophisticated, but it had a unique digital signature, a specific way of executing trades that was like a fingerprint. On its own, it doesn't mean much, Marcus said, tapping the screen. But then we cross-referenced that signature with historical trading data, and we found a match. The exact same algorithm was used by Victor Langford's primary hedge fund for years, until they switched to a new system about 18 months ago. Adrian leaned forward, his eyes locked on the screen. He's using his old playbook. Routed through an untraceable network, Marcus confirmed. But here's the final piece. Argent Ventures, the company tied to the LL Trust. We pulled their incorporation documents. The trust is the silent partner. Yes. But the listed legal counsel on the incorporation, the same law firm that has handled Victor Langford's personal estate for the last 30 years. Adrian leaned back in his chair. The web was complete. The ghost they had been chasing had a name and a face. It was a personal, methodical, grief-fueled attack, orchestrated by Victor and disguised as a corporate raid. He's not just trying to take the company, Adrian said, his voice low and cold. He's trying to erase me, to rewrite history so that I'm the villain of the story. Adrian, this is it, Marcus said, his excitement palpable. This is the proof. We can take this to the SEC. We can leak it to the press. We can blow him out of the water. Adrian stared at the diagram, the lines and arrows representing millions of dollars all flowing from one man's hidden pain. His first instinct was to strike back, to expose Victor for the hypocrite and manipulator he was. But then he hesitated. A public battle with the SEC would be long and messy. It would drag the company through more mud, and it might not be enough to stop Victor's hostile takeover attempt, which was now imminent. Victor had already accumulated a significant block of shares through his anonymous entities. No, Adrian said finally. A press leak or an SEC filing is a battle. I don't want to win a battle. I want to end the war. What do you mean? Marcus asked, confused. Victor has been buying up our stock on the open market, trying to trigger a panic. Adrian explained, his mind racing, a new strategy forming. He thinks he's the only player. He's about to force an emergency shareholder meeting and call for a vote of no confidence. He's going to try and take the company from us in our own boardroom. He can't, Marcus protested. We have the votes. He's been peeling away our allies, Adrian said. The pension funds he influences. The smaller investors spooked by the media narrative. The vote will be closer than you think. He wants a public stage for my execution. A slow, cold smile touched Adrian's lips. So, we'll give him one. He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city. He wants to put me on trial in front of the shareholders. But he's made a mistake. He thinks the past is his weapon. He doesn't realize it's mine, too. He turned back to Marcus. Prepare a presentation. I want every piece of this financial web laid out, clear and undeniable, and start digging into the archives of my first company, Phoenix Innovations. I want every document, every project file, every safety report related to the accident. Marcus stared at him, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. You're going to confront him at the meeting. I'm not going to confront him, Adrian corrected. I'm going to dismantle him, in front of the entire world. He chose the time and place. I will choose the weapons. The announcement came 2 days later, citing grave concerns over the current leadership and the catastrophic loss of shareholder value. Victor Langford, acting on behalf of a consortium of concerned investors, formally called for an emergency shareholder meeting for Nova Dynamics. The sole item on the agenda, a vote to remove Adrian Cross as CEO and restructure the board. The financial world erupted. It was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The culmination of weeks of speculation and corporate bloodshed. The meeting was set for the following Friday, in the grand ballroom of the Skylux Hotel, a venue known for its dramatic, high-stakes events. It was to be a public spectacle. The week leading up to the meeting was the calm before the storm. The attacks on Nova Dynamics ceased. The stock price stabilized, albeit at a dangerously low level. It was as if both armies had retreated to their camps to prepare for the final, decisive battle. Inside Nova Dynamics, the atmosphere was a strange mix of dread and defiant resolve. Adrian's team worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and a fierce loyalty to the man who had weathered the storm with them. Sarah's communications team prepared statements for every possible outcome. Marcus's financial analysts finalized the presentation that would expose Victor's network of shell companies, triple-checking every data point. Adrian himself seemed to retreat deeper into his own focus. He spent hours locked in his office, sifting through old, digitized files from Phoenix Innovations. They were ghosts on a screen, blueprints, progress reports, budget spreadsheets, and among them, the official incident report, a dry technical document that detailed the catastrophic failure of a prototype energy converter, the resulting explosion, and the single fatality, Leo Langford, chief engineer. Reading it again after so many years, Adrian felt the old, familiar ache. It wasn't guilt, but a profound, unending sorrow. He remembered the immediate aftermath, the shock, the grief, the invasive questions from investigators. He remembered facing Victor for the first time after the accident, seeing not just a grieving brother, but a man whose sorrow had already curdled into a cold, hard stone of blame. "My brother believed in you," Victor had hissed at him in a sterile hospital hallway, his face a mask of rage. "He followed you, and you led him to his death. Your ambition killed him." The official investigation had cleared Adrian and the company of any negligence. The failure was traced to an unforeseeable flaw in a third-party component. But the truth had never mattered to Victor. In his story, Adrian was the villain, and he had spent the last 2 decades waiting for his chance to prove it. The night before the meeting, Helena Ward met Adrian for a drink at a quiet, secluded bar. The place was all dark wood and soft leather, a confessional for the city's powerful. "Tomorrow is your big day," she said, swirling the amber liquid in her glass. "Are you ready for your own immolation?" "Victor is the one who will be playing with fire," Adrian replied, his voice even. "Perhaps, but he has the narrative on his side. The grieving brother, avenging a tragedy. It's powerful. You are the cold, calculating CEO with a secret. How do you fight that?" "With the truth," Adrian said simply. "It's the one thing he has never been willing to face." "The truth is often a matter of perspective," Helena countered. "And Victor has had 20 years to perfect his—" She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "My sources tell me Victor has something else. A final blow he plans to deliver at the meeting. Something personal, designed to destroy you completely, not just as a CEO, but as a man." Adrian met her gaze, his own expression unreadable. "I know." Helena raised an eyebrow. "And you're not concerned?" "I am prepared," he said. He knew that for Victor. This was never just about the company. It was about inflicting a pain equal to the one he felt. "Be careful, Adrian," Helena warned, her usual cynicism softening into something resembling genuine concern. "When a man has nothing left to lose but his grief, he can be capable of anything. Don't underestimate the power of his pain." "I don't," Adrian said quietly. I've lived with it, too. He left the bar and returned to his silent apartment. He didn't work. He didn't review the presentation. He simply stood at the window, watching the city breathe below. He picked up the faded photograph of himself and Leo one last time. Their smiling faces, a ghostly echo from a more innocent world. He had spent years trying to build a future that would honor that past. Tomorrow, he would have to tear it all down to save it. The Skylux ballroom was a formal, tense arena. The air was thick with the scent of money and anticipation. Hundreds of shareholders, board members, and journalists filled the seats, their faces illuminated by the cold glow of laptops and smartphones. A row of television cameras stood like a firing squad at the back of the room, ready to broadcast the execution to the world. Adrian sat at a long table on the stage with the other board members, a lone figure of stillness amidst the nervous energy. He looked out at the crowd, his face a calm, impenetrable mask. Victor Langford took the podium first. He was masterful. He began not with anger, but with a somber, wounded dignity. He spoke of his love for his younger brother, Leo. He painted a picture of a brilliant young engineer, full of promise, who was lured into a risky venture by a charismatic and ambitious partner. Adrian Cross sold my brother a dream, Victor said, his voice trembling with practiced emotion. A dream of changing the world, but it was a dream built on a foundation of recklessness. They cut corners. They ignored safety protocols. They pushed the limits of technology not for the sake of innovation, but for the sake of speed, for the sake of being first. He then pivoted to Nova Dynamics. And now we see the same pattern. A brilliant company. Yes, but one teetering on the brink. Its stock in freefall. Its future uncertain. History is repeating itself. The same reckless ambition that led to my brother's death now threatens the livelihoods of thousands of employees. He presented charts showing the stock's decline. He read anonymous, damning quotes from former employees about Adrian's demanding leadership style. He was weaving a powerful narrative, connecting the past tragedy to the present crisis, painting Adrian as a man whose ambition was a destructive force. He was putting Adrian's very character on trial. When he finished, a heavy, sympathetic silence filled the room. He had laid the trap perfectly. Then, it was Adrian's turn. He walked to the podium, his steps measured and silent. The hum of the projectors and the frantic clicking of cameras were the only sounds. He didn't immediately speak. He simply stood there for a moment, letting the weight of Victor's accusations settle in the air. Mr. Langford is a compelling storyteller, Adrian began, his voice calm and clear, carrying to every corner of the room without any hint of strain. And the story he tells is a powerful one. It is a story of grief, of blame, and of a tragedy that should never have happened. And on that last point, he and I are in complete agreement. He clicked a button, and the large screen behind him came to life. It wasn't a chart or a graph. It was a simple, high-resolution scan of the official accident report from Phoenix Innovations. This is the official finding from the federal investigation into the accident that took Leo Langford's life. Adrian said, "It concluded, after a 6-month investigation, that the cause was a catastrophic failure of a third-party capacitor, a component that had passed every one of our safety inspections. There was no negligence. There were no cut corners. There was only a terrible, unforeseeable tragedy." He moved to the next slide, which showed internal company documents, time-stamped and verified, detailing the extensive safety protocols they had implemented, protocols that went above and beyond industry standards at the time. "Victor tells you we were reckless," Adrian said, his voice gaining a hard, steely edge. "The facts say we were meticulous, but facts have a way of interfering with a good story. He then shifted his focus. Now, let's talk about another story. The story of Nova Dynamics' recent stock performance. The screen changed to the complex web of shell corporations Marcus had uncovered, slide by slide, document by document. Adrian began to dismantle Victor's scheme. He showed the trading algorithms that matched Victor's hedge fund. He showed the incorporation documents linking Argent Ventures to Victor's personal law firm. He exposed the entire, calculated campaign of financial sabotage. A low, shocked murmur spread through the audience. The shareholders were leaning forward, their expressions shifting from sympathy for Victor to stunned disbelief. The reporters were typing furiously. The crisis of confidence at Nova Dynamics was not a result of my leadership, Adrian declared, his voice ringing with authority. It was manufactured. It was a lie, orchestrated by one man for the sole purpose of destroying this company so he could pick up the pieces. Victor, who had been sitting with a look of smug satisfaction, was now white as a sheet. "Lies!" he sputtered from his seat. "Fabrications!" Adrian ignored him. He advanced to his final slide. "The question is why? Why would a man go to such lengths it is, as he said, about his brother, but not in the way he claims?" This was the moment, the main twist. Victor has never forgiven me for Leo's death, but he has also never forgiven his brother. Because Leo didn't just follow me. Leo believed in what we were building. He poured his own inheritance into Phoenix Innovations, against the express wishes of his family and his older brother, who wanted him to pursue a safe, traditional career in finance. Adrian looked directly at Victor, his gaze like a physical blow. "You weren't angry that I was reckless, Victor. You were angry that Leo chose my dream over your plan for him. You saw his passion as a betrayal. And when he died, it was easier to blame my ambition than to accept his choice." It was then that Victor Langford finally broke. He surged to his feet, his face contorted in a mask of pure, raw anguish. "He was my brother," he screamed, his voice cracking, the sound echoing through the shocked silence of the ballroom. "My little brother. He looked up to you, and you led him into that death trap. You killed him. His blood is on your hands." His confession, born of desperation and grief, was more damning than any of Adrian's evidence. He had just admitted to the entire room that his crusade was nothing more than a personal vendetta, a warped expression of 2 decades of unresolved sorrow. He had transformed, in a single, agonizing moment, from a corporate titan into a tragic, broken man. The room was in an uproar. The board members were staring at Victor in horror. The vote was now a foregone conclusion. Adrian had won. But as he stood at the podium, he felt a sudden, profound emptiness. He looked at Victor, a man hollowed out by his own hatred, and he felt not triumph, but a deep, weary sadness. He had one final slide prepared, a final secret he had uncovered. It was a copy of a letter, written by Leo to their father, confessing that he had taken a significant loan against the family's trust to fund the project. A secret he had begged his father to keep from the notoriously controlling Victor. Revealing it would not only explain the source of Victor's fury, but would utterly shatter the Langford family's legacy of financial prudence, humiliating Victor in a way that would be unforgivable. Adrian's finger hovered over the button. This was the secondary twist, the final, devastating blow he could deliver. He could destroy Victor completely, inflicting the same kind of personal pain Victor had tried to inflict on him. He looked at Victor's face, crumpled in grief. He saw the ghost of Leo. He saw the wreckage of 3 lives, and he made his choice. He slowly lowered his hand. There is nothing more to say. Adrian said quietly into the microphone. I call for the vote. He had won, but he had refused to become the monster he was fighting. He chose to end the war not with total annihilation, but with a quiet, deliberate act of mercy. The cost of victory, he realized, was not something he was willing to pay in full. The vote was a mere formality, a landslide. Adrian's position as CEO was secured with a resounding vote of confidence. Victor Langford was immediately and unanimously removed from the board of directors. Security guards, materializing as if from nowhere, flanked Victor as the chairman of the board officially requested his departure. He didn't fight. All the rage had drained out of him, leaving behind a fragile, hollow shell. He allowed himself to be escorted from the ballroom. His head bowed, the flashes of the cameras chasing him like angry specters. The press descended on Adrian, a chaotic scrum of microphones and shouted questions. He answered them with his usual economy of words, his face betraying nothing of the emotional turmoil within. He spoke of the company's future, of moving forward, of rebuilding shareholder trust. He was the picture of a victorious leader. But inside, he felt none of the elation of victory. The raw, primal grief in Victor's final cry echoed in his mind. He had exposed a man's deepest wound to the world, and the act felt less like a triumph and more like a transgression. He returned to his office late that night. The building was quiet, the adrenaline of the day having faded into a deep, pervasive exhaustion. Marcus and the rest of his team had left him a bottle of expensive scotch and a handwritten note, to the man who holds the line. He looked at it, but felt no desire to celebrate. He sat at his desk and looked at the faded photograph of himself and Leo. The smiling faces from the past now seemed impossibly tragic. He had won the war for the future of his company, but the ghosts of the past felt more present than ever. Helena's words came back to him. Don't underestimate the power of his pain. He hadn't, in the end. He had chosen not to mock it, but to spare it from ultimate desecration. Yet, the victory felt incomplete, tainted by the sorrow that had fueled the entire conflict. The power he had just so decisively consolidated felt heavy, like a crown made of lead. Days later, the media frenzy had subsided into a steady hum of positive analysis. Nova Dynamics stock had rebounded spectacularly. Adrian was being hailed as a corporate genius, a master strategist who had turned his enemy's greatest weapon against him. But the praise felt hollow. There was one final piece of business to attend to. He drove out to a quiet, manicured cemetery in the countryside, a place of rolling green hills and ancient oak trees. He found the grave easily. The headstone was simple. Elegant marble, Leo Langford, beloved brother and son. A brilliant light extinguished too soon. He wasn't surprised to find someone already there. Victor was standing before the grave, his expensive suit rumpled, his shoulders slumped. He looked older, smaller, stripped of all his bluster and arrogance. He was just a man, mourning his brother. Victor heard Adrian approach, but didn't turn. They stood there for a long time in a shared, silent grief, the space between them filled with everything that had been said and everything that had not. The investigation said it was a faulty capacitor, Victor said finally, his voice raspy, directed at the headstone more than at Adrian. I never believed it. It was too simple, too random. I needed a reason, someone to blame. Adrian stood beside him, his hands in his pockets. I know, he said softly. He admired you so much, Victor continued, a tremor in his voice. He thought you were building the future. I thought you were a reckless fool leading him astray. I couldn't understand why he chose you. Your dream, over his own family. He finally turned to look at Adrian, his eyes red-rimmed and filled with a weary, defeated sorrow. "You had a letter, didn't you? At the meeting. The one he wrote to my father about the loan. Helena's people are good, but I know you wouldn't have gone into that room without an ace up your sleeve. Why didn't you use it?" "Because it had nothing to do with the company." Adrian replied, "It was a family matter. And his memory, Leo's memory, deserved better than to be used as the final blow in a corporate war." A single tear traced a path down Victor's weathered cheek. He gave a short, choked laugh that was more a sob. "He won. You know. My little brother. He bet on you. And he won." In that moment, in that shared, quiet space of loss, the animosity that had defined their lives for 2 decades simply dissolved, leaving behind only the profound, aching truth of their shared tragedy. There was no forgiveness. Not yet. But there was a flicker of understanding. The following week, Adrian called a press conference at Nova Dynamics headquarters. He didn't talk about quarterly earnings or stock projections. Instead, he announced the formation of a new, independent subsidiary of the company, a non-profit foundation. "Power, in business and in life, is a tool," he said, his voice resonating with a new kind of authority, one tempered by his recent trial by fire. "It can be used to build or to destroy. At Nova Dynamics, we will always choose to build." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the assembled journalists. "Today, I am proud to announce the launch of the Leo Langford Foundation for Ethical Innovation. This foundation will be dedicated to funding and mentoring young engineers and entrepreneurs who are working on projects that prioritize safety, sustainability, and human dignity above all else. It will be a testament to the fact that ambition and conscience can, and must, coexist." It was a final, powerful, symbolic act. He was using his restored power not to crush his enemies or to enrich himself, but to build something positive from the ashes of the tragedy. He was transforming a story of revenge and loss into one of redemption and hope. It was his own rebirth, a quiet declaration that his true empowerment came not from winning the fight, but from choosing how it would end. He was no longer just a CEO. He was a leader who understood the true weight of the past and the real promise of the future.